You've probably felt it, right? You see it in the headlines, you hear it in the news. Far-right movements seem to be gaining ground all over the world, really shaking up politics from Europe to the Americas. But what's actually driving this global wave? In this explainer, we're going to break down the research to get a handle on the forces at play.
Okay, so let's start in Europe. The 2024 European Parliament elections basically confirmed what a lot of people were seeing. Far-right parties are gaining some serious influence. They're really tapping into people's worries about immigration, the economy, and national identity, and because of that, they now have a much bigger say in how the EU is run.
And look, this isn't just a European story, not by a long shot. The very same currents are at work across the ocean in the Americas. We're seeing these populist movements and so-called strongman leaders popping up from North to South America, which proves these shifts are definitely a global thing.
So what we're all witnessing here, it's not just a few random, isolated events. It's much more like an interconnected global wave. You've got countries all over Asia, Africa, and Latin America, all dealing with similar kinds of challenges to the liberal democratic order that has, pretty much defined our world for decades.
This brings us to a really crucial question. What do we actually mean when we say far-right? It's a term that gets thrown around all the time, but it's not just one single thing. To really get what's going on, we have to break it down.
So, at its heart, think of far-right as a big umbrella term. Under that umbrella, you'll find a whole range of parties, movements, and ideas that are all sitting at the very edge of the right-wing spectrum. But the one thing that unites them, the thing they all have in common, is that they pose a fundamental challenge to the established liberal democratic system.
Okay, now here's where it gets a little more specific, and honestly, pretty interesting. Under this big umbrella, scholars make a really key distinction. See, not all far-right groups are the same. And the biggest difference between them? It all boils down to one thing, their relationship with democracy.
You can really see the split here. On one side, you've got the radical right. These groups, they work within the democratic system. They accept its rules, but their goal is to undermine and change it from the inside. Then you have the extreme right. They're not interested in playing the game. They reject democracy completely and want to replace it with something authoritarian. It's a huge difference, right? Working within the system versus wanting to tear it all down.
So we've got the political labels down, but what's the fuel for this fire? What's really driving this? To truly get it, we need to go a little deeper than just politics and look at the powerful emotions that are pushing it forward.
A key psychological idea that comes up in the research is this concept called ressentiment. It sounds a little academic, but it's a pretty simple idea. It's the process where deep, negative feelings, like frustration or feeling left behind, get twisted and transformed into a powerful political weapon. Pure anger and blame, all aimed at a group that's been labeled the enemy.
And this emotional journey, it's like a chain reaction. It all starts with a feeling of fear or insecurity, like your place in the world is being threatened. That feeling of weakness can turn into a kind of hidden shame, which then explodes outward as anger and hatred. And then comes the final crucial step. All that intense emotion gets pointed at another, immigrants, the elites, the media, who get blamed for everything.
This quote from psychologist Jonathan Haidt just absolutely nails it. He explains that the emotion of contempt, which is at the very core of ressentiment, does more than just show anger. It actually dehumanizes the target. It makes them seem ridiculous, worthless. And when that happens, it's like a switch gets flipped in our brains that shuts down other feelings, like empathy or compassion.
So, okay, that's the theory. But what does this look like in the real world? How does it all actually play out? Well, let's dive into a really powerful case study from Greece, the rise and fall of the Golden Dawn Party.
So I want you to picture the scene. It's Greece, back in 2012. The country is in the middle of a just devastating economic crisis. Unemployment is through the roof, nobody trusts the government, and there's this national feeling of being humiliated. It was the perfect storm, really. The perfect breeding ground for an extremist movement to capitalize on all that public pain and anger. So who was drawn to Golden Dawn's message? This exit poll data is fascinating. It shows that their voters were overwhelmingly male, a whopping 76%, and unemployed people were heavily represented, at 16%, which was way higher than the national average. They were talking directly to the people who felt the most abandoned by the crisis.
And their strategy was pretty sophisticated. They took all that public anger and aimed it squarely at immigrants. They painted themselves as the ultimate outsiders fighting a corrupt system. And, this is crucial, they blended normal politics with really aggressive street activism, all while providing social services like food banks to their supporters. It created this powerful, all-in kind of movement.
And for a while, it totally worked.
They stormed into parliament in 2012, and by 2015, they were the third largest party in Greece. But here's the twist. The very same extremism that powered their rise, all the violence and radical ideas, is exactly what caused their downfall. The state finally cracked down, the party was declared a criminal organization, and it just collapsed.
The story of Golden Dawn is a really stark warning of how these forces can play out. So let's zoom back out and try to understand the bigger, global challenge that all these movements pose to democracy itself.
And here's the crucial takeaway. Whether we call them radical or extreme, at the end of the day, these movements fundamentally erode public trust. By constantly attacking the media, the courts, and the legitimacy of elections, they weaken the very foundations that our democratic societies are built on.
You know, this isn't just about normal political competition. This is a direct challenge to the core values that have defined political thought for centuries, ideas like democracy, freedom, and equality. The stakes really couldn't be higher.
And all of this leaves us at a crossroads, with the huge question that the research forces us to ask: are these movements just a temporary backlash, something that democracies can handle and eventually overcome, or are they a symptom of a much deeper crisis? Maybe even the beginning of the end for the world as we've known it. The final chapter to that story, well, it hasn't been written yet.